Good morning, everybody. It's Chris Howarth here, founder of Making Changes. Sorry I've not been around too much this week for many posts. It's been a busy week in many ways, but I've also taken a bit of a step back as well. I've been doing quite a lot of internal work because I've been heavy on the social media for the last few weeks. You know, and sometimes you need a bit of a rest and you need to look after yourself. So I've been doing this meditation course, which has been really interesting. But I thought today's a good day where I'm switching off from all that, no work, and so I can really try and put some energy and focus into putting a post up, which will hopefully be helpful or interesting or insightful, and give you a bit more of an insight into making changes and what I've put into the program. I'm going to quickly cover off spirituality. And I say quickly, which is kind of impossible really, because you could spend months, years trying to work out what spirituality actually means, because it means so many different things, and I don't think there is one particular meaning for it, which in a way is a good thing because it leaves it open to interpretation for each individual when they go through whatever program, if they want to take it on and believe in it and embark upon it, or not, if they want to keep it kind of practical. What I've tried to do is do a gentle introduction into what I think, the way I live my life spiritually, and for other people they will live it completely differently. It's got many forms, you know, things like astrology and believing in crystals and the power of that and all that type of stuff. There's that level of spirituality which I don't know anything about, so I can't comment on that. But the spirituality that I kind of learnt about through my own journey, but also through my academic studies as well, when I wrote my thesis, which was on spirituality and religion as part of the 12-step program. And I just want to raise a point really, which before getting on to what I explain spirituality in a very simplistic way at the start of Making Changes, because much like religion and other terms within certain programs, even the word spirituality can put people off or kind of scare people a little bit. And so it's about, for me, breaking it down into really simplistic forms, and that you don't have to be a kind of Buddhist monk living in a mountain to embark upon what can be deemed a spiritual lifestyle. But firstly, I'm just going to read a short paragraph from my thesis that I wrote as part of my dissertation, and it just touches on the religious aspect that's within AA and how that prevents both academics, scientists, as well as people in society missing out on some of the psychological and therapeutic benefits that are actually contained within the program. And there was a lady called Wendy Dossett who I collaborated with, and she's a religious professor from Chester University who's done a lot of research into religion and spirituality within the 12 steps. And this particular paragraph that I wrote reads that what can be seen is that the religious element can demean the psychological credibility of 12-step programs, in addition to potentially turning off and alienating non-religious people. And it creates a stigma that then restricts any further scientific or research-led approval from academics and any potential future advocates, because they kind of don't want to explore everything else that's within the 12 steps, which is what I wanted to do and what I've wanted to include in Making Changes. And Wendy Dossett, who I mentioned, this is a specific quote from some of her research, has pointed out that while the language which is expressed in AA texts and meetings seems religious, even pious or moralistic, it can be reframed entirely in psychological and effective terms. And it suggested that if more people in the science and research field were fully aware of this, it may actually become a source of information that is better utilised than it currently is. And I'm talking about in those fields because it has a stigma, you know, within academic circles. And that sentence, it can be reframed entirely in psychological and effective terms. We can then do that with things like spirituality and how we explain spirituality to people. So that's what I've tried to do, is to basically reframe it entirely to extract the psychological benefits in a way which is effective to people who otherwise wouldn't explore something like that, because either it's religious or it's stigmatized in a certain way. And two people who I also included in my thesis were Ernest Kurtz and William White, who I believe are American researchers who've they may be in the Fellowship of AA, but they've done a lot of research around secular recovery as well as religious recovery. And the way that I've kind of included it into making changes, and I'll read this in terms of, this is in our first change that we do, where we lightly touch on spirituality, and again I kind of gently introduce it so as not to scare people, because it can come with this kind of it's all a little bit out there, and is it for me? I was a bit like that when I started my recovery, but I tried to keep an open mind, and this is exactly how I perceive spirituality in my life. And again, this is my kind of interpretation of it, and I've tried to do it in a way which I think lends itself to the most amount of people who, for whatever reason, might be slightly put off just by the word itself. And so it reads, spirituality and secularism can go hand in hand, and do so for many people in recovery. It is a psychology that forms part of the Making Changes program that brings about transformation, which can be spiritual. And it's not a belief in religion, as is proposed in other programs. And the exercises that we carry out in Making Changes bring about and help us learn about principles that relate to behaviours and beliefs, which I believe to be what make up living a spiritual life. And there's probably an endless list, but I've tried to include as many of these here as possible. And they are things like acceptance, control, resentments, courage, fear, balance, serenity, motivation, honesty, communication, positive attitude, an open mind, empathy, compassion, self-respect, gratitude, and more than likely many others. And they are what bring about the changes in our lives when we go through this program. Because beforehand, as addicts, we were embracing things like fear, but we didn't have a handle on them. But we weren't practicing, a positive attitude or an open mind or empathy, serenity, balance, all these types of things. And so quite simply, for me, and the way that I try and encourage spirituality in this program, it's quite simply, it's based on how a person lives their lives. And two key things in addition to that, which the program really focuses on, is awareness and insight. And it's that self-awareness of being able to implement all those things that I've mentioned there, or have an awareness about things like fear, and how we can counteract that and kind of flip that around. But that insight into ourselves and what makes us who we are, what makes us tick. And going back to the two people that I mentioned, Ernest Kurtz and William White, they'd done a massive research across AA and other programs. And they created their own definition of spirituality, which I felt was really good for making changes, and it really resonated. And they've worded it as when it's applied to those seeking to change their lives from alcohol and or drug abuse, there's evidence to show that each person's journey is made up of 6 different experiences that consistently tend to emerge. This does not mean that all 6 experiences are in every story that's told. It does mean that just about every story describes at least one, and usually 2 or 3 of these experiences. And they are release, gratitude, humility, tolerance, forgiveness, and belonging. Now, some of those are included in all those phrases that I mentioned earlier, and some of them aren't. And that's it. That's the gentle introduction to what spirituality, as a basis, can mean for somebody who's moving out of an addictive lifestyle. It's that release. And that's not just the release of the substance or the alcohol or the behaviour, But when we go through the program, it's the release of the baggage of carrying around everything that we've done in the past, because we work on that. And the release on a daily basis of trying to let things go. So the release has so many things that it can apply to. Gratitude, something that we've probably never practiced before, but if we do learn to practice it and we do so regularly, we know that it has a good impact on us. Humility is a really, really powerful character trait that we can learn to develop as well. Tolerance, and that's tolerance perhaps of ourselves at times, tolerance of other people, and with that comes compassion for other people. Forgiveness, what's the opposite of that? It's resentment. When we don't forgive people, we hold on to resentments. So if we learn to forgive not only ourselves but other people, and belonging, and that's belonging to, it could be a community, but just belonging and feeling connected to the human race again when we felt so isolated. So that's it. That's a very simplistic way of how I've tried to explain spirituality from the outset within the program, and hopefully it's done so in a way where at first, if people, and I've worked with people, and you mentioned spirituality, and it's the shoulders go up, people get really tense, and it's like, oh, what is this? What are you trying to do to me? And most of the time, when I break it down in that particular way, that's how I implement living spiritually into my life. If I can implement all those things, and with awareness and insight, they're two key things, and they come with things like meditation and practicing mindfulness. They strengthen the awareness and insight. It helps me live what I deem to be spiritually. Some might just say it's just living well or living good. You can break it down even more simpler than that. You don't even have to label it as living spiritually. It's not important. What is important is implementing those principles and those guidelines. If you want to call it spiritual, that's great. Is it just a bit of a buzzword that's going around? Maybe. That's not what's important. What's important is those behaviours and learning those principles and those guidelines. And when that's explained to people, some people like thinking, okay, yeah, I can start to live spiritually because it sounds pretty cool as well, doesn't it? But you don't have to. It's not important. What's important is those words that I've mentioned there. And so that's a very quick explanation of spirituality. You could write whole research papers. I could sit here for 3 hours talking about different definitions of spirituality and going into it. The key thing is for me as well is that you can live spiritually without being necessarily religious. If you are religious, you will tend to implement a lot of these principles as well. So you could argue that religion includes spirituality as well. There's lots of crossover between these things. But if we go back to what Wendy Dossett said, it's like anything, all these languages and all these terms can be reframed entirely, and that's what we can do. We can reframe them. The end results are the same. It's just about reframing and rewording things. We live in 2021. A lot of this stuff was written many, 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 many decades ago, and sometimes we just have to reword things that make sense for people today, and that's what I've tried to do in making changes. I was hoping that I was going to get that across in 4 or 5 minutes, but I never seem to be able to do so. I'm trying to cut down these posts, but it's still within the 15-minute barrier. I'll hopefully be able to get more posts up next week, but if not, don't worry, you just got to understand I'll be probably working on myself, but I'm also really busy as well in terms of progressing, making changes. We're getting out there. Trust me, we're going to be growing, talking to more charities, more businesses and more people. So 2021 is going to be a big year, and I'm sure that we're going to be getting out there, getting this message out there and helping more people and working with other people and learning from other people and other programs as well. So yeah, happy Sunday. Hope you have a good day. I'm taking it easy today. Be a nice dog walk with my little mum, and that's about it. Nice rest day. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.